All right, this is what you do, guys, right? The heart, thumbs up, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, right? So this is Mike Brown, and we are back at it to talk to you more about the Bronx, right? And the changes that are happening in the Bronx, and just in response to some of the comments, right? Because, guys, your comments are not wrong. You're not bad. Look, where you live might be shitty. I get it, man. It's a tough neighborhood. The Bronx is tough. It gets a bad rap. And so, again, my perspective is growing up in Brooklyn, Crown Heights, Brooklyn, 1990s, 1980s, crack epidemic. That was shitty. That was a war zone. Now I get it. It's relative. It's somewhat war zone-ish in some of these neighborhoods. I don't know. I don't believe you, but it's all your perspective, and I'm not here to say that you're wrong or right. What I'm here to do, though, is give you perspective on where the real estate market is going. And shout out to, oh my God, who commented? Forgot. Anyway, we want to talk about multifamily homes specifically and why the jump in price, right? Because it's driven by a few factors. I think supply and demand is one of them. The other one is subsidized rentals, right? And the subsidized rental amount has driven the price of multifamily homes. That's 2 to 4 family homes up dramatically, not 5 and up, right? I'm only talking about duplexes, triplexes, and 4 families. That's all we're going to talk about today, right? So from January 2021 to today, 2026. So in 2021, there were about 6 months of supply of 2-family homes, right? Today, there's still about 7 months of supply, right? So that hasn't changed much. I think depending on the neighborhood, you're going to see some changes, depending if you're looking at Throgs Neck versus the South Bronx versus Soundview versus Castle Hill, that kind of stuff. But the biggest eye-opening numbers that I saw were these. And it was the median sales price compared to 2021 to now. Actually, I'm going to go all the way back to 2016, right? So 2016, the average multifamily in the Bronx cost about $455,000, $525,000. You'd be lucky if you found a single family in the Bronx today at that price. Today, your average 2-family to 4-family house goes for $900,000, right? And so that is a 98 increase in price, right? 98% increase in price. So one of my people was like, yo, is that driven by the subsidized rentals? I think a lot of it is, right? CityFHEPS, Section 8, 1-bedroom goes for what, 24, 26, 27, right? And so 1-bedrooms in the Bronx, they weren't commanding that for a while, right? But now they can, right? So that's why the other day we were talking about Queens versus Brooklyn versus the Bronx. It's all relative, right? Because if the 1-bedroom in all those boroughs is 26, 27 on a program, it's going to drive the value of the property here, right? And I saw the same thing happening in the secondary home market in beach towns like Long Beach Island, Cape May. When my son was first born, my oldest now is 13. When he was first born, we had the opportunity to buy the house that we've been going to for a couple of years. That house at the time was going for $530. The owner was willing to sell it for. Today, that same house is going for $119. It's a big difference, right? And so a lot of that has been driven by VRBO, right? Vacation rental by owners. The owners now in LBI think that their house is worth $40,000 a week as a rental, right? So for 9 weeks or 8 weeks through the summer, whatever the number is, 30 times 9, that's a 200. Not real, right? Right? Some of the houses there were commanding that price, but a lot of the rentals were not, right? And the other thing was Airbnb, which I'm kind of glad they got rid of it in the 5 boroughs, because I think that was creating a false inflation in many neighborhoods as well, right? Where, I'm getting, $3,000 a week for my house. That's not a real number, right? So I think those have had a negative impact or unintended consequences to local real estate, particularly here, right? So the other thing is supply and demand. We were working with a buyer. He was moving from East New York, Brooklyn, right? And he was buying my listing on Briggs Avenue. And I remember at the time when he was looking, everything that he was looking at in this price range in Brooklyn was not in move-in condition, basically, right? So in his price range for the same house, he couldn't find a house that was in move-in condition. Came to the Bronx. He found the house that was in move-in condition. And I'll give you a funny story. So we had the final walkthrough, and the owner, and so he scheduled the final walkthrough for early Saturday morning. And the owner was like, could you push it out just an hour to give people a time to wake up a little bit? Now, when he says people, he was talking about the community, right? And he didn't want the buyer to see some elements of the community that might have deterred him. But the buyer was coming from East New York. It was the same elements, right? So he wasn't deterred at all, right? And so that's why when I talk about things are changing here in the Bronx, that's my perspective, right? Because you're going to have someone that moves from, Queens, Brooklyn, South Jamaica, Queens, East New York, and move to Fordham and think Fordham's amazing. And they're going to change that community tenfold, right? Or wherever they move to. The other part that I see the impact of real estate values in the Bronx is in New York City public schools. So my wife is a high school teacher at the Evander Childs campus, and I was at a career fair. We talked about what we do and give the kids some insight to our different careers. I felt like the halls were empty, and when I talked to her about enrollment is down dramatically. So think about it like this. In 2016, the buyer who bought that house for $450,000 is a different buyer than the buyer today who buys that house for $900,000, right? This is just my perspective. You buy a house near Gun Hill Road for $900,000. Most likely you want to send your kids to charter school, private school, some other school. You most likely will not send your kid to the Evander Childs campus, right? And so you're going to see the dynamic in the Bronx change on so many fronts. And again, it's going to be gradual then sudden. You're not even going to know it's changing. And then you'll come home from college. You'll come home one day from 2 years from not being here. And you're like, oh my God, the concourse is way different. Or 3rd Avenue is very different, right? The hub is going to take some while, right? That's where everything is, right? A lot of the challenges are there in the hub. But I'm telling you, when I lived at Lincoln Avenue, go down there now, right? It's another world. Bruckner Boulevard, it's another world between that corridor. It's just different. When I first moved there, there were all the antique shops, right? Now there are a bunch of restaurants. So, guys, there will be a steakhouse on Fordham. There will be a steakhouse in High Bridge, right? There is a steakhouse in my neighborhood in Crown Heights. If you would have told me that 25, 30 years ago, I'd have told you, get out of Dodge, right? But it's there. And I went there, and it was amazing, right? So, protect your neighborhood, buy something, get your rent stabilized apartment, lock it down. Whatever you got to do to lock down your community now, do it, right? Or you will be in Poughkeepsie soon. Nothing wrong with that, but you'll be commuting to Poughkeepsie, to your job in Manhattan, hour and a half commute, pissed off. Well, you got to drive from the Poconos all the way to Manhattan because you didn't heed the warnings or didn't see the signs. The signs are there. The writing is on the wall. Just read it. All right, so that's my spiel today on the Bronx and why it's changing, how it's changing. Get your piece now, or I'll see you in Newburgh. Peace.